there are two other ways that I want you guys to learn, or two ways I want you to learn. One of them, to memorize the unit circle without having to draw the entire unit circle. Okay, one of those, sorry, make sure we're still on the line. Okay, so one of those would be with this table right here. As long as you can memorize just this, you will have everything that you need to know for the unit circle. This would be your 30-degree reference angle, 45-degree, and this would be a 60-degree reference angle. This means all students take calculus. What this means is that and that's including sine, cosine, and tangent, all three are positive in the first quadrant. S stands for only sine is positive in the second quadrant, which means tangent and cosine are negative in the second quadrant. The T means only the tangent is positive in the third quadrant, which means that sine and cosine are negative in the third quadrant. And the C means only the cosine is positive in the fourth quadrant. So if we are looking at something in the fourth quadrant, then sine and tangent, the sine and tangent of that would be negative. This is a chart. These are the same charts. This is just going in ascending and descending order by degrees. So you can also use one of these. It's up to you which one you guys want to use between these three. The problem with this is you do have to memorize all of this, okay? And if you make a mistake while writing it down, then all of your answers would be incorrect. So you just need to make sure that you know this very well. You will need to know how to do exact values and memorizing one of these three charts when you go into pre-calculus next year. So I started a video and I had some problems. That's why I already have one done, but I will walk you guys through how I did this problem. So the first thing you have to say is it's 7 pi over 6, okay? And we want to find the reference angle. So one way we already know just looking at it what the reference angle is that if there is a 6 in the denominator, then the reference angle is 30. 4 would be 45. If there's a 3, then it's 60. A 2 in the denominator is 90, and if the radians are 0 degrees. So when we see a 6 in the denominator, we automatically think, okay, 30-degree reference angle. But more than just that, we need to know if the tangent is positive or negative, and to determine that, we have to find out which quadrant it's in. So we know 7 pi over 6. We know this is 1 pi, right? Halfway around the circle is 1 pi, so that would be 6 pi over 6, and then we just go pi over 6 past it, putting us right here. So we are in the third quadrant. Now, the tangent of the third quadrant, all students take calculus. This T means the tangent is positive in the third quadrant. So that's why I wrote a plus sign here. And since our reference angle is 30 degrees, we're going to look at this point, and we're going to find the tangent of that. And remember, tangent is sine over cosine. Sine goes second, so that's 1/2 over the square root of 3 over 2. When we divide by a fraction, we multiply by the reciprocal. The reciprocal of the square root of 3 over 2 is 2 over the square root of 3. The 2's cancel, leaving us with 1 divided by the square root of 3, and then we rationalize the denominator by multiplying the numerator and denominator by the square root of 3. And that gives us the square root of 3 over 3. Okay, so this is the one that I'm going to be using mostly, but I can also show you how to use this table. So once we figured out that it was positive and that that 30 is our reference angle, we can go to 30 degrees and say the tangent of 30 degrees is the square root of 3 over 3. Now I know that this required more work, but this one requires a lot of memorization. It's totally up to you, whatever you guys want to use. Next is sine of 225 degrees. So we're going to draw a sketch, and we know that this is 180, and then we go just 45 degrees past 180 to get to 225. Since we are 45 degrees away from the x-axis, our reference angle is 45 degrees. And then we have to say, okay, in the third quadrant, which that's where we are, is the sine positive or is it negative? Since tangent is the only positive one in the third quadrant, that means that we are going to have a negative, our SIGN is negative, or sine is negative. So now we want to say at 45 degrees, what is the sine? So we can go to 45 degrees would be this one. Sine is second, so it's square root of 2 over 2. Again, you can go here, 45 degrees, sine, square root of 2 over 2. Okay, next is cosecant of 270 degrees. So 270 degrees, we'd go 180 and then go another 90 to get to 270. So we are right here, okay? We are 90 degrees away from our, it doesn't matter which way you go for this one, from our x-axis. So our reference angle here is 90 degrees, okay? And this is kind of where this table maybe faults you, because if you went to a 90-degree reference angle and you said you're finding the sine is 1 and cosecant would be the reciprocal of that, which is 1 over 1. But our answer here is not 1. Because if you look here, we know that this is one of the special ones where we have a point. These are 4, when we end up on an axis, those are the 4 kind of special cases here. So when we end here, we can see, okay, we're here at 270, and the sine is second, so the sine is actually -1. But since this is the cosecant, it's 1 over sine, and 1 over -1 is still -1. Okay, let's look at this one. This is the sine of 2 pi. So 2 pi, we know that's just all the way around the circle, and we end up here. So we would go, and we would say when we're at that point, sine goes second. Our reference angle is 0 degrees because we're 0 degrees away from the x-axis, and sine goes second, so the sine is 0. Okay, this one is cosine of 31 pi over 6. So we're going to have to do a couple rotations here. Since we have a 6 in the denominator, we know that we're going to have a 30-degree, sorry, not there. We're going to have a 30-degree reference angle. Okay, so now we can draw a sketch. Now, 31 pi over 6, you know that every 6 pi over 6 is 1/2 rotation, and every 12 pi over 6 would be 2. So if we divided 30 divided by 6 would give us 5. 5 pi, and then we'd still have another pi over 6 to go. So you could think of it this way. This would be 6 pi over 6. This is 12 pi over 6. This is 18 pi over 6. This would be 24 pi over 6. This would be 30 pi over 6. And then we're just going to go pi over 6 more right here, which that is going to be 210 degrees. That is in the third quadrant. And we can see that in the third quadrant, only tangent is positive, which means our answer is going to be negative. And the cosine is second. I'm sorry, sine is second. So cosine would be first, which would be here, square root of 3 over 2. Okay? And you can use this table to say 30 degrees. And then you would say, okay, cosine of 30 degrees, square root of 3 over 2, you would just need to make sure that you know what the sign is, the SIGN, whether it's positive or negative. Okay, cotangent of -45 degrees. So if we're rotating -45 degrees, that's just going to be 45 degrees clockwise, which leaves us 45 degrees away from the x-axis. So our reference angle is 45 degrees. The next thing we'd have to say is the cotangent positive or negative in the fourth quadrant? That C does not mean the cotangent is positive. This only refers to sine, cosine, and tangent. So this means the cosine is positive in the fourth quadrant. What we're concerned with is the sign of the tangent. Since cosine is positive, that means sine and tangent are negative. And since cotangent is the reciprocal of the tangent, that means that this is going to be negative. Okay, and the tangent of -45 degrees, so we would go to 45 degrees. Tangent is sine over cosine, which is y over x. And the cotangent is the reciprocal of that, so the cotangent is x over y. So that's negative square root of 2 over 2 divided by the square root of 2 over 2. Anything divided by itself is 1, and since this is negative, it's -1. Okay, so let's look at the next one, cosecant of 1080. All right, so Let's draw a sketch. Okay, so 1080, how many times around the circle is that? This would be 360, 720, and if we subtract 720, that's going to give us another 360 degrees, which means we end up right here at the point 1, 0. Cosecant, remember, is the reciprocal of sine. So the sine is 0, and the reciprocal, or 1 over cosecant is the reciprocal of sine, and sine would be y. So the cosecant is 1 over y, and y at the point 1, 0 is 0. So 1 over 0 is undefined. Our answer will always be undefined if there's a 0 in our denominator. I'm going to move these up here, and you can also use your table here. So our reference angle would be 0 degrees, and you can say that's another problem with this table, is it doesn't have the reciprocal identities in it. So you would have to say the sine is 0 and 1 over 0 is undefined. So it's the same way. Next is sine of 390. So let's see where that is. That's a full 360 degree rotation. And if we go 360, that leaves us with 30 degrees more to go. So we are looking at a 30 degree reference angle. And if we're looking at a 30 degree reference angle using this table, the sine of 30 degrees is 1/2. Or you can use this table and say if it's a 30 degree reference angle, sine goes second, so it's 1/2. Okay, tangent of 9 pi over 4. So if we were to sketch this, 9 pi over 4, so this would be 4 pi over 4, right? This is going to be 8 pi over 4, and then we're going to rotate another pi over 4, putting us right here at 45 degrees. So our reference angle is 45 degrees. Oh, and this last one, I don't think I talked about the sign. In the first quadrant, they're all positive, so that's how we knew this is positive. Now, again, this is in the first quadrant, so again, it's going to be positive. And with a 45 degree reference angle, which means we're looking at the point square root of 2 over 2 divided by the square root of 2 over 2. Tangent is sine over cosine, so it's the second one, which is square root of 2 over 2, divided by the first one, which is square root of 2 over 2. But again, since we're at 45 and these are the same, it doesn't matter. Anything divided by itself is 1. Okay, let's look at sine of 420. So let's go ahead and sketch this guy. So we would rotate 360 degrees. And we can subtract here. That leaves us with 60 degrees. So we rotate another 60 degrees, putting us right here. So our reference angle is the angle formed with the terminal side of our angle and the x-axis, which here is 60 degrees. So that means we're looking at this point here. Since we're in the first quadrant, again, it's positive. And the sine of 60 degrees, sine goes second, would be the square root of 3 over 2. Okay, cotangent of negative pi halves. So we can graph that here. Negative pi halves would just be right here. Right here. So that is a 90 degree reference angle. And when we're here, that's this point we're looking at right here. And cotangent, remember tangent is sine over cosine, which is y over x. So cotangent is x over y. So it would be 0 over negative 1, which is just 0. Okay. I'll do a couple more with you. Make this. where my tape went. Okay, so secant of negative 240. So we can go ahead and sketch this. So that would be, let me use a different color. That would be 90, 180, and then we'd have to go another 60 degrees to get to 240, okay? So that means we are 60 degrees away from our x-axis, so our reference angle is 60 degrees. Okay, so our reference angle is 60 degrees, and we are in the second quadrant. So when we're in the second quadrant, only the sine is positive, which means the cosine and the tangent are negative. Secant is 1 over